So we've been to a lot of tech conferences over the years, Paul, but the conference last week felt different. The optimism was gone, the hype was gone, and what replaced it was something much heavier. The realization that AI isn't just changing industries anymore, it's starting to rewrite the landscape, or the rules, if you prefer, of work itself.
Yeah, and it's important to put that into context, isn't it, for people listening, that this wasn't a room full of hobbyists playing with ChatGPT at the weekend. These were founders and directors running serious businesses. You know, they're all at least 5 million. Most were above 10, 20 million turnover. They're dealing with payroll, they're dealing with margins, they're dealing with hiring challenges and the real pressures of scaling companies in 2026. And what was fascinating was the conversation wasn't theoretical anymore. These people aren't asking, what is AI? They're asking what happens to a business if I don't use it, and what happens if I rely on it too much. So welcome back to Ctrl Alt Dev, the podcast where we cut through the hype around AI, technology, and the future of business.
Thanks, Paul. And this week's episode is a bit of a reality check. We're going to give you a proper temperature check on where AI actually sits in your business right now. Not the headlines, not the LinkedIn hype, but the raw truth from the trenches.
Yeah, and what founders are really saying behind closed doors, what's working, what's breaking, and where the next big shifts are coming.
So if you want to understand where AI in business actually stands in 2026, stay with us. So before we dive into this week's topic, Paul, we should probably acknowledge something. This is episode 20 of Ctrl Alt Dev. Can you honestly believe when we started this podcast early last year, it was really just two software guys trying to make sense of what was happening in technology? The emergence of AI in our industry, development, and the technology world moving at ridiculous speed.
Yeah, and if you go back to those early episodes, Sean, the tone was very different, I think. We were talking about AI as this, fascinating new tool, something you could experiment with, something that developers were playing with prompts. Businesses were still very, in the early stages of testing all automations. It all felt very exploratory. Like the big message at the time was play with AI, wasn't it? If you want to learn AI, play with it. You and I even built Sleeping Beauty, which is a really perfect example of that phase, using AI, sales Android to awaken dead leads, sitting dormant in CRMs, nurture them back into genuine sales opportunities. It showed how AI could sit silently in the background doing useful work without businesses having to completely reinvent how they operated.
Yeah, exactly. And back then, AI was really like a sandbox. People were curious. Let's see what this thing can do. And that's actually, like you say, how Sleeping Beauty started. We built it to wake up those dormant leads, certainly in both Paul and I's CRM systems, contacts that business had paid good money for to acquire, but had simply gone cold over time. So the idea was simple: use AI to re-engage those contacts, start intelligent conversations, and gently nurture them back into genuine sales opportunities. And I have to say, it's really taken off. Businesses are realizing there's a huge amount of untapped value sitting quietly inside their databases. So if anyone's listening or anyone's interested, as I'm going to plug our joint venture, if you want more sales, we'll drop a link in the show notes today where you can read all about Sleeping Beauty and just how it can help reawaken those forgotten leads.
Once a sale, always a sale, eh, Sean? I mean, yeah. I'm so uncomfortable.
It just rolls off the tongue, Paul.
It does, Sean. So yeah, AI isn't, I guess, the interesting new toy anymore. It's rapidly becoming infrastructure. Businesses now feel they have to use it, and the pressure from competitors, investors, staff productivity. But at the same time, what I'm finding is that most companies I speak to still don't fully understand how to deploy it. They don't know where to start.
Exactly. And that's where things get messy, because what we're seeing now is businesses being told they must adopt AI, but nobody's really explaining how to integrate it properly, responsibly, securely, and profitably into real operations that businesses are doing each and every day.
Exactly. So, like when we planned episode 20, which is where we are today, we thought it was a good moment to step back and say, well, episode 19 was about kind of a look back over the last 19 episodes. This one is about that temperature check you talked about, isn't it? It's exactly where we are with all of this. You know, what is actually really happening in businesses today? What is hype? And where are businesses genuinely struggling? And I think just a 2 minute scroll on LinkedIn is just AI, 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 AI. So the actual message and the kind of noise around it is huge, and it's incredibly overwhelming if you can't cut through the noise, if that makes sense. So even I feel overwhelmed scrolling on LinkedIn.
We you and I were just saying earlier on, we're getting busier and busier, and that's because there's opportunities that we're getting from our consultancy side as well. But at the end of the day, as you rightly say, people know about AI. Well, they know it's around, but they don't know what they can do with it. And that's the struggle. So when you and I go into these opportunities, really we fire back the question, listeners, to the owners of the business and say, look, what is the most, just give us one painful process that we may be able to automate. You may have 5, 6, 10, but just give us one process. So that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
So yeah, so first up, Sean, is another great listener question. They want to remain, sorry, anonymous, which I don't quite understand, but
I
I
do.
respect your privacy. So,
I suppose it's
um,
like, I suppose, before you start with this question, I think again, because AI is fast, it's just growing at such an alarming rate. People don't know if the questions they're asking are intelligent questions or, basic questions, and
yeah,
I suppose that's probably why they're remaining anonymous.
that's a good point. Yeah, I'm sorry, listener, for being rude. I was like, I think it's a good. My point is, I think it's a good question. That's why I was like, okay, but I couldn't understand it. So they've written in and they've said, I keep hearing about agentic AI, something that we keep talking about, systems that can take actions on our behalf rather than just answer questions, like just being generative. So as a business owner, where do I even start without adding yet another confusing tool, wasting money, and putting something into my team's already overloaded workflow?
And
Great question.
you're right. It is a brilliant question because it hits on a problem we're seeing everywhere right now. In fact, you and I went to see a large agency last year, and that was one of the questions that I agreed to with. There's so many vast tools out there. So which one would you choose? So businesses are being told to add AI to everything. New platforms, new dashboards, new co-pilots, new assistants. And before you know it, your team has 10 different tools open just to do one job or one task.
Yeah, and I think that you kind of, before we even got to list a question, you framed it perfectly. The question is not what tool to use. The question is what's the problem to solve. Like if you don't have a clear problem, a clear bottleneck, you'll end up implementing something that will become expensive. I mean, one of the myths with AI is that it's free. It is not free, and actually, tokens, which we could talk about in another subject, cost a lot of money. They are not, they're not free. When you get an LLM actually doing some agentic AI stuff and it's processing large amounts of data, it becomes expensive. So what you have to have is a clear understanding of, well, what is the cost now? Because if you have a process in your business that's costing you £100,000 a year in waste, actually spending £10,000 a year on a process that eliminates it is well worth the investment. But if you just look at the subscription and the token fees, you'd be confused as to going, well, why am I paying this? Why is it just another tool? So it's exactly what you said. It's exactly what Steph said. Tina said it. Peter Lowe said it. Start with the bottleneck. Start with the problem. And the irony is, AI was supposed to simplify work, not make it more complicated. So what we're seeing is lots of companies doing the opposite. They're being bolting on different systems, different tools without any strategy, any deep thinking about what they're actually trying to solve. And what ends up happening is people have a huge fear of wasting money, and it actually slows people down. And that's the exact opposite of the goal. So, yeah, over to you,
No, I
Sean.
was I was just literally thinking there about what you were saying about the AI token waste, and that would be a fantastic podcast because I must have wasted quite a lot of money because my business partner would be going, "What have you been wasting it on?" But it's true, isn't it? Because you've got all these tools, and you know, you and I are obviously testing things and things like that. But you just think about the waste that people
But I
have
don't
used.
think it is waste though, because like if you're learning any new technology, it goes back to the play thing. The play
Mm.
is a huge part of how we learn as human beings from being toddlers. So, as a grown up, you'd say, "Oh no, I'm iterating. I'm kind of learning and improving." So, we're all going to do things with a new technology that doesn't give us instant results. But what you've got to be really clear on is what's the goal, and that's where people are like, "Oh, I'll plug in a note taker." Okay, but to what end? Why are you plugging in a note taker?
Yeah.
Oh, because I want to do this process then with it. Okay, so automate the process. Get really clear on the time that you're wasting. I mean, I was on with somebody yesterday, just to digress quickly. A council run service, really great guy, and he was handwriting notes. And I literally said to him at the end, we wrapped it all up and stuff, and we'd agreed kind of like opportunities, and I just said, on a serious note, why on earth are you writing down notes on paper? So what do you have to do with that now? And he said, well, in the next hour I'll send you a write-up of your notes, and then in 2 weeks what I'll have done is put it onto like a file note, and then I've gone away and done some actions. And I'm just like, oh my God, by the time you click stop record, you could have had all that
Yeah.
automated
With
so that
Whisper.
instead
Yeah.
you're spending your time on relationships and you're spending your time on getting in front of more people and offering more value, not writing up notes. And I
Yeah.
said, you'll have written down some notes as well that I would have said. They're just not relevant. You're literally writing down everything I'm saying, like verbatim, so that you catch everything. And I'd argue 20% of what comes out of my mouth has got any value. So like it's not just waste of light. But I said, how can you be listening? Like, I know it's a skill that people have, but I'm like, can you imagine if you were just focused on who I am, what I'm doing? You've done a great job, by the way. Like, I'm not having a go at you, but I'm like, how many of these consultants exist across the UK? And we got into the hundreds, and I'm said, so hundreds of people are doing this process that you're doing, which for 10 years or 20 years was absolutely fine. But it's not, to me, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable in 2026 not to have some form of note taker. Even if you develop it yourself, you can get audio to be recorded in loads of different ways. You can get it through an LLM using workflow stuff. You don't even have to use an off the shelf thing. So
No.
rant over, but
No,
it was like,
you're absolutely right, because I went to a meeting this week, and I was thinking the same thing. This guy was writing notes, and I said, you should be using a tool like Whisper or something very similar.
yeah, or granola, or
Or
what? I mean,
Granola.
there's
Yeah.
loads of them,
I
aren't
mean,
there? I mean,
absolutely.
we use
Save.
Fireflies for years,
Yeah.
and you can literally, we did it together in a meeting. I remember you just put your phone in
Yeah.
center of the table, and you literally say, is it okay if I record it? Have you got any objections? I've not had not one person saying no. And then actually they get excited and say, can you send me the notes? And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's what it's there for.
And
But it's not
the amount of time
the
saving as well. It's crazy.
but the goal is to be more human, isn't it? AI is a human multiplier. We've talked about it being a productivity multiplier. It enables the human to do their best work and the things that only humanity can do, which is build deep, deep relationships, connect with people, and solve problems. So what I'm trying to say with a note taker is a simple analogy. It's not about taking notes. It's about what do you then do with those notes? What's the process that happens? And 9 times out of 10, there's some weeks of work that follows down the line that are reliant on those notes. That's the outcome. That's the thing. And for this guy, it was about connecting people to different people and opening markets and opening doors. So that's what he wants. So actually, why can't it go and synthesize those notes,
Mhm.
analyze them, clean them up, and then put automated emails drafted? It might not be in a trust thing yet where we want to send it off, but it's like, here you go, it's going to connect these people. And just a lot of the stuff he was referring to as well was like web links. Like, he shouldn't have to even compile that email,
No.
and then he's delivered his service, which is to help me grow. So yeah, I will shut up.
No, 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 no. It's all good stuff. So the key principle we keep coming back to is this: AI should remove friction from a business, not introduce more complexity. If it's creating extra steps, extra logins, or another tool to your staff that they have to learn, you're probably approaching it the wrong way.
Yeah, the starting point shouldn't be the technology, it should be the problem. Always, full stop, period. Look at the bottlenecks in your business. Where are people wasting time? Where is the business losing money? Where are there repetitive, manual, constantly being reworked tasks? Those are the pressure points where AI can make a massive difference because it can slot into workflows and remove the grind. And that's exactly what you and I do, isn't it, Sean? When we're brought in to help businesses, we don't start by asking which AI tool do you want to employ. We start by identifying the bottlenecks in their operation. So, where are you duplicating work? Where are emails piling up? Where are sales opportunities being missed? And back to the Sleeping Beauty. Excuse the plug, listeners.
Great
So
plug.
where a process is slow, error prone, or dependent on one person remembering to do something like a salesperson. So once those friction points are clear, that's when AI starts to make sense. But then you're not chasing shiny technology. You're solving real operational problems of inside the business, and most importantly, you can prove a return on investment.
Yeah, well, Paul, you're absolutely smashing the plugins today. But,
Cheers, Sean.
but to be fair, you're absolutely right. Between us, we built plenty of AI automations for lots of businesses in the last 12 months, and we spend a huge amount of time reading, testing, and analyzing everything that's happening in this space. So we know a tiny bit, but the real lesson here isn't go and buy more AI tools. I think we've just covered that very well. That's the trap of a lot of companies, and that's what they're falling into right now. The lesson is this: identify the friction in your business first, then use AI to eliminate it. When AI removes bottlenecks, saves time, simplifies workflows, that's when it starts delivering genuine value rather than just adding another, as Paul said, shiny piece of tech to the pile.
So one of the biggest shifts we're seeing right now, Sean, is psychological. 12 months ago, the dominant emotion in business was FOMO, the fear of missing out on AI. Everyone was worried their competitor was doing something magical with it and they were being left behind. But the fear has changed. What we're hearing now more than ever is the fear of wasting money. So FOWM. I don't know how you would say
God,
that.
it's so easy. It rolls off the tongue, that one, doesn't it?
But it's definitely. I was literally at that conference you were talking about, and the questions weren't about identifying £100,000 problem in your business. It was, oh, I don't want to spend money on more subscriptions. I don't want to adopt more tools, this sort of thing. But it could be boiled down to the fear of wasting money. So business owners aren't worried about missing out on AI. They're not worried. They're worried about buying the wrong tools, signing expensive licenses, and discovering 6 months later that nothing actually improved. And remember when I said, Sean, only 20% of Replit applications get released. So it's a lot of wasted money. And we're talking to business owners now who are spending $3 to $5 a month on Replit. They've built a number of apps and they're building, but they haven't launched. So is that a waste? And the data backs this up. One recent stat that recently caught my eye was 56% of CEOs say they've seen zero meaningful payoff from their AI investments so far. And the reason's simple: they bought software. It didn't fix the workflow underneath or know how to use it or even know what problem they're solving and the cost to the business. So
Yeah, and that's the key problem, isn't it? Because AI can't magically repair a broken business process. If your CRM is messy, if your data is incomplete, if your workflows rely on manual workarounds, AI will simply amplify the chaos. Cue Sleeping Beauty again. I'm doing it now. Gosh, we're going to lose listeners for overselling, Paul. But in all
I think so.
seriousness, it's the old rule of computing, garbage in, garbage out. When we talk to business owners, the same concerns keep coming up. They say things like, I know I need AI, but I don't actually know where it fits in my business. Or I'm terrified of wasting money, as we said, on tools my teams won't use. And the big one we hear all the time is, my CRM is already a mess. How's AI going to fix bad data? So what's happened is a lot of sensible businesses have moved into wait and see mode. And to be honest, the caution is completely understandable because there's a lot of noise out there.
And when you look closely at companies struggling with AI adoption, the mistakes tend to follow the same pattern. The first mistake is adding complexity instead of removing friction, like you said, Sean. Businesses are stacking new AI tools on top of old systems rather than redesigning the underpinning workflows. The second mistake is they're thinking the value lies in coding itself. but the cost of producing software is collapsing rapidly because AI can now generate huge amounts of code. So the value isn't in writing the code anymore, it's in knowing what to build and why. But then you look at the top 1% of companies getting this right, and they're doing something completely different.
Yeah, and they're focusing on what we call the bleeding neck problem. In other words, what's the issue that's actually hurting the business today? And a brilliant example is lead management. In most professional services, something like 70 to 80% of leads go cold and sit in a CRM graveyard. It's exactly why, and now I'm doing it again, we built Sleeping Beauty to reactivate those dormant opportunities automatically. And you mentioned about wasted AI tokens, but there's so much wastage in CRM systems because they charge you on the leads that are in your system. So instead of chasing shiny AI experiments, the smart companies are saying, let's use AI to recover revenue we're already sitting on. They're also demanding audible outcomes, not endless AI pilots, not experimentation for the sake of it, but measurable financial returns. And the other thing that's changed massively is the speed of execution. With tools like Replit and modern AI coding environments, it's now possible to build small, bespoke micro software solutions in hours rather than months. And that's changing the economics of innovation completely.
And here's another thing that's in that shift that we're starting to see in business culture as well. Is for years, the status symbol in businesses was team size. People bragged about headcount, how many employees they had, how big the organization was. But that signal's changing as well. The real flex now is operational freedom. Businesses run in lean teams, highly automated workflows, and profitable operations where the founders actually have time back in their week. Things like the 4-day week, smaller teams doing more output, and we're starting to call agentic fluency, companies that understand how to orchestrate AI agents alongside human teams.
I think that's a huge point, Paul, because AI shouldn't be about replacing humans. It should be about removing the admin and the friction so humans can focus on what they're actually good at, which is relationships, creativity, negotiation, and trust. So the businesses that win with AI won't be the ones with the biggest models. They'll be the ones who use AI as a human multiplier.
I love that.
Yeah,
The overriding thing that I took away from this conference I went to was that trust and partnerships and relationships. And one quick anecdote is there was a couple of stories of founders who had scaled beyond 5 million, but actually they'd lost their businesses. So two were related to global initiatives. They were literally on there was two different companies. They were literally telling stories of they were on the launch of like a global initiative. Two were focused on China, and they both launched their businesses in January 2020. And then obviously the world went into lockdown. So they lost their business, everything else. But what they said was the thing that survived, the reason they're able to go again was the relationships and the partnerships that they'd forged in the years of building the businesses and building it out. And that just said to me that like, that's a really good point because there's a lot of distrust with AI. There's a lot of distrust with hallucinations. There's a lot of negativity around it. But actually, if you can get, like you've just said, the AI to accurately do the work of the human, the admin and the friction, that's where we should all be going. And that's the human multiplier, isn't it? Is we should all be focused on how can we build trust? How can we get amazing at building relationships? And then on top of relationships, partnerships, because I think you'll get a lot more specialized companies who do one or two things incredibly well, but they can add to their own service offering and their own problem solving by doing partnerships. And that's like exactly what we're doing with Tina, isn't it? So it's like it's bringing talented teams together to provide solutions through partnerships, whether they're referral partnerships or product partnerships. But that to me was the epiphany I've had in the last 2 weeks. Is we've talked about AI as a productivity multiplier. It is a human multiplier, and that's profound.
totally agree.
So after that little bit of a rant, let's get quickly through some of the big stories of this week from the world of AI. So first up, the safety versus speed debate. So Anthropic has softened parts of its original safety first position, which is quite alarming as an Anthropic user. So what it tells us is just how intense the competition is becoming in the AI race. Speed is winning markets. Second is the measurement crisis. So AI is improving so quickly that traditional benchmarking systems are struggling to keep up. That makes forecasting incredibly difficult for businesses and regulators alike. And third, the AI first hardware, like the new Samsung Galaxy S26, is embedding AI so deeply into its operating system, it signals a shift from AI being a tool to becoming the ambient layer of computing. And I know that's your favourite phrase from the last episode 19, Sean. And then finally, like global governance, 86 countries have now signed the International AI Cooperation Declaration, which shows governments are beginning to treat AI like infrastructure, and that's very similar to internet or even nuclear technology.
Yeah, and one more fascinating trend is the AI hiring paradox. We mentioned it in a few episodes, but despite all the talk about automation replacing jobs, the reality right now is the opposite. As I said last week in episode 19, AI and software companies are hiring like crazy because AI can't deploy itself. You still need engineers, yes, integrators, compliance experts, and strategists to actually implement these systems properly. And the final big question emerging now is liability. As we move into agentic AI systems that book meetings, trigger workflows, even make purchasing decisions, we're entering into complete new territory. If an AI agent makes the wrong decision, who's responsible? Is it the company, the developer, the vendor? And that's a legal and ethical debate that's only just beginning. Perhaps we should get a lawyer on the show, Paul. Any interested listeners out there? Give us a call.
Yeah, so if you step back and look at the bigger picture of what we're witnessing, it's something quite profound, like we've said. The entire software industry is going through workflow inversion. The traditional model where companies slowly built large monolithic software systems is fading, and the role of the traditional software developer, like ourselves, Sean, is changing dramatically. The real value now lies in orchestrating systems, integrating AI agents, and designing workflows that actually produce measurable business outcomes.
You know, that's something that we have to struggle with every single episode. We have to put our teeth in, listeners, because some of these words, it's just incredible, isn't it? You know, where do they come up with these
especially with a Brummie accent? Try
words.
saying that with my accent.
Agilic and monolithic, it's like, you know, honestly. Anyway, that's probably the perfect place to wrap up today's episode, Paul. The future doesn't belong to people chasing AI hype. It belongs to what we'd call strategic architects, people who can bridge the gap between the technology and real audible business results. If you'd like to hear more about some of the case studies we worked on, we plugged a few today, and they are real business examples that we've implemented AI automation and seen some fantastic measurable improvements. Just drop us a message and we'll be happy to share them with you. And if you're curious about Sleep and Beauty, you're definitely rubbing off on me today, Paul, how it can re-rake the dormant leads sitting quietly inside your CRM system. We'll include a link, as we said earlier on, and you can read more about it. And of course, if you've got pressing questions, want to bounce around an idea, would like to arrange a conversation with Paul and I about your business and how we can help you with your AI strategy, just get in touch. As Paul said, Tina's going to be joining us as well. But remember, the mantra we talked about throughout this episode is remove the friction, don't add complexity. And with that, thanks for listening. We've been Ctrl Alt Dev, and we'll see you next week.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.